We are Squawking Dead, a podcast pulverizing programs beyond the Walking Dead universe. Sometimes we give you news, sometimes we make you laugh, most times we go deep. And today we're here to bring to you our first discussion on AMC's Dark Winds. We're about to introduce to you both our Season 1 and 2 recap, as well as our discussion on the very first episode of its third season. One thing to keep in mind is that these episodes will be relatively back-to-back, as we recorded them during two separate occasions, the first of which, the recap, I am actually not present for. However, there will be sections from the Season 3 premiere discussion that will appear in the recap as they serve to correct the record on some mistakes that we made along the way. It's good to kind of front load some of that information before we continue, because if my voice suddenly appears in the recap discussion, you'll actually know why. So without further ado, I sincerely hope you enjoy our first ever discussion on AMC's Dark Winds. I hope you had enough time to catch up as we discussed the inevitability of us discussing this series in our last episode, as well as catching you up on some of the things that we've been up to. Without further ado, here is our discussion of Dark Winds. First things first is the recap.
Squawking Dead, a podcast pulverizing programs beyond the Walking Dead universe. Sometimes we bring you news, sometimes we make you laugh, most times we go deep. I'm Punky Brewster, and I'm joined today by...
That's my mom 09.
Blazy Gardner.
We're here today to cover seasons 1 and 2 of Dark Winds that is airing on AMC.
Dave, do we have any housekeeping we need to talk about?
Oh yeah, I'm so stupid. Dead City Season 2 has been for the longest time said, oh, we're going to be releasing in spring of 2025.
Whatever that means.
Whatever that means. I had said, oh, it's April because that's spring. That's when they usually say it is, or late April, early April, whatever it's going to be, which I dreaded. But it turns out just today during IGN Fest, it's like days-long digital convention, let's say. Each day is kind of like a theme, and today's theme was horror. They had a Dead City recap segment. From there, they went to The Walking Dead, The Ones Who Live, because there's a lot of press behind that because it appeared on Netflix. Later on, they did an interview with Jeffrey Dean Morgan, Lauren Cohan, and Scott Gimple. I'll put the links in the description, plus the blogs and all that stuff. And in it, they finally announced when season 2 would air, and that is May 4th, 2025 on AMC, and probably earlier on AMC Plus. And not only did they announce that and have these interviews, but they also had the first few minutes of the season premiere of Dead City Season 2. Check out our merch store, because I think by the time this episode releases, we will have long since dropped our Dark Winds graphic or logo design. I think both, because I have a concept for the art in my head that I think will work really well. It's actually a frame from near the end of Season 2. It's literally 2 frames. One of them is a clear shot of this tree with a crow hanging from one of the branches.
I remember that.
Mm-hmm.
It's so distinct. It's like burned in your after image, right? You close your eyes, you kind of see it.
Well, they hold on it for long enough that you're like, what?
Ooh, that's what the blonde man sing. What does that mean in Native American folklore that we can't actually break down because it's season 2 and we've gone past that? They show it once and they show it twice. I remember so distinctly because they wanted you to get that impression. Another thing I found out today was that season 4 was greenlit even before season 3 aired of Dark Winds.
I've told you, Dave, they got like 24 novels to work from.
Yeah, that doesn't mean the series is going to continue.
24 seasons. You heard it here first, folks.
Then again, they did continue Fear the Walking Dead for a couple seasons too long.
They're like, let's milk this property as long as I can. No, they give us screeners.
There's
Never
dust
mind.
coming out.
I take it back. They're perfect in every way. Thank you.
We're going to be addressing Native American indigenous people's culture. I'm not an expert. If we inadvertently say anything that is offensive or wrong, it's not meant that way. As a matter of fact, if we say something that's incorrect or you find offensive, let us know. we're curious and we want to know.
On that topic, I would like to mention that I did read a Reddit thread recently about Dark Winds. And as it turns out, according to Navajo people, the pronunciation is not great. And the representation of ceremonies is pretty bad. And in fact, they say that this is the show that they like to watch when they need a good laugh. So I don't think that much of this is going to be realistic in any way, because it would seem, according to Navajo people, this is not doing their culture justice in the right way. It falls back on the responsibility of Hollywood. Vet your people.
I feel like a fair amount of respect would have been very easy to accomplish. Do your homework.
Yeah.
Hollywood only recently stopped casting Italian actors as Native Americans. The fact that this is
True.
mostly Native American actors and crew is
Well,
like
and
a step
indigenous
forward for them.
peoples. It's pretty wild. I will say Hollywood's just really lazy, and it's a lot about making a quick buck. And so even when people are like, well, you're appropriating cultures, they're like, yeah. We'll hire someone that claims they're an expert, and that'll be good enough for us. And maybe that expert won't have been vetted properly, and maybe actually isn't an expert at all. I don't know. I'm not saying that about the person who works for Dark Winds. I have no idea who they are. But according to Navajo people, it's not a super great situation. And it reminds me of a little movie you may know called The Prince and Me. It stars Julia Stiles. It's not great. But I lived in Manitowoc, Wisconsin when it was released. And they portrayed Manitowoc, Wisconsin in it. And I have to say, it could have not been more inaccurate. They said that we had a nice 4-year college. No, we don't. We did not. They also said that on the weekends they did tractor pulls. Also not true. It was demo derbies, if anything. So get your facts straight. It's very disappointing to me on a lot of different levels, but the real disappointment comes from the fact that Tony Hillerman wrote the original Leaphorn and Chee novel series. It's now known as the Leaphorn, Chee, and Manuelito series because Bernadette became such a beloved character in it. Anne Hillerman took over the books. Tony Hillerman wrote 18 of them. Anne Hillerman, his daughter, took over and continues to write, and she wrote 8 novels so far, with one releasing as recently as last year.
Wow.
So this is still
those. Yeah.
very much a series that is continuing. It began in 1970. He was actually awarded a Friend of the Navajo title for his work trying to get these things right and for trying to showcase problematic things amongst the Navajo people that at the time people didn't want to talk about. People don't want to talk about uncomfortable things. Navajo people could tell me Tony Hillerman can kick rocks. I'm not sure. But at one point in history, he was doing his best to service the Navajo people and be considered a friend of them. And so it's a little bit sad to know that still things aren't right. But when it comes to ceremonial stuff, I would imagine some of that is private and probably wants to stay private to the Dene people. And so we're just going to kind of leave it at that. We're going to try to do our best to not be insensitive and to be open and want to learn about this, because I think all of us really want to learn. I grew up in the era of people really wanted to know about, not necessarily Navajo, but we were given a lot of it in school. And so it's always been a topic that I've found really interesting.
I have read a lot about Native Americans and indigenous peoples, but my focus was generally on East Coast tribes because I read a lot of American history, colonialism and stuff, and that's just where it is. So I have not read a lot about Navajo culture, so I really don't know much at all.
I grew up believing that I had Chippewa in my ancestry until about 7 years ago when Ancestry.com proved me wrong. Everyone in our family was told that for...
Is that like an Irish people
forever.
thing?
I don't...
Because anyone I know that's Irish, their family is always like trying to claim that there's some indigenous in there. Like,
Right.
yeah, Cherokee princesses and whatnot. And that's very widely perpetuated in Appalachia also.
Mhm.
And who knows, truly, really?
Well,
down
apparently,
the line?
according to my spit, it's not true.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's, well, we're very white. So what are you going to do?
Well, I brought it up pretty nice.
I do not. When they mention the wild monster coming out of the desert,
That was you.
covered in red hair and burned viciously by the sun, I was like, that's me.
Bridget's like, my people. That's
And she's
my
like,
people.
turns out it was just an Irish farmer. And I was like, yeah,
Oh
yeah,
my gosh.
yep, that's me.
Bridget
That's
gets
me.
burned when you just say the word sun.
Like it's already happening. Anyway, Anne Hillerman is working as an executive producer on the show. The Dark Wind is the original novel. It was published in 1982, and it's actually the 5th book in the series.
Story that we're seeing is?
So I don't know. I can't say that.
Oh.
Now, I did find out today The Blessing Way is the first novel that was released in 1970. It is on Audible for free. I will be listening to these books as quickly as I can because I would like to have a little more information as to why we landed on Dark Winds being the name. Is that the storyline from where it starts? It doesn't seem like it because Chee is in all of the novels with Leaphorn. So to me, it seems like maybe we're starting from kind of the beginning, but it's probably going to be a super abridged version.
Well, if there's so many books, I think I read somewhere that they took elements from different stories and combined them into the show. The majority of the story may be from one book, but other elements of it are from other books and stories.
Yeah.
My feeling is they're probably going to pick and choose and incorporate aspects from all of the different stories into one storyline.
It makes sense too, with them having come from the 1970s to today, essentially. There's probably some stuff in there that's maybe problematic by today's standards, and maybe we don't want to touch that. So I could see them cherry picking what they wanted to. So I did start listening to the Hillerman audiobooks, as I stated that I would in our recap of season 1 and 2. So hopefully by the end of us recording this season, and by the time you hear this, which will be weeks in the future, I'm probably further along than I am now, but I'm an hour and a half into the first book, which is entitled The Blessing Way and was released in 1970. The Dark Wind, the novel. Remember I'd stated like I wanted to figure out like why was that the one that they landed on for the name. So I found out more as to why, but I also did a little bit of research into Tony Hillerman himself because I really wanted to see like where was his standing amongst natives now? Time passes, things change, and people decide maybe he shouldn't have received that award or whatever. So I just kind of
He's
wanted
super canceled now and problematic.
I just wanted to see. I was just curious. So I found out that Tony Hillerman actually grew up in Pottawatomie County, Oklahoma, and he attended elementary school and high school with Pottawatomie children, which, fun fact, Pottawatomie is the casino in Milwaukee. And so that tribe has received quite a bit of my money because I used to go there and lose a lot. So there's that. So I'm just going to read a couple blurbs. This is in his Wikipedia, but there were a couple little pieces in here that I thought were really interesting. Jeffrey Herlihy argues that this background that Hillerman had made possible a significantly different portrayal of Native Americans in his writing in comparison to other authors of this time. Hillerman said, most obviously important was growing up knowing that Indians are just like everyone else, and you grew up without an us and them attitude about other races. So he considered his childhood in Pottawatomie County to be the sole contributor to this situation, this ability to kind of see beyond the race of people and look at people for who they are.
I feel like this series has made a concerted effort to actually show the differences, though. Not to say that that's not necessary. I do think that's necessary, but I think in some places it's a little, I don't want to say heavy-handed, but yeah, maybe that's the best I can do.
So he really wanted to celebrate the differences for the Navajo people in particular by honoring their traditions and showcasing what the reservation was like. He'll talk about things in the books like, oh, white men think that the res is the size of a city, whereas it's the size of New England. It's kind of this view that when I say like he didn't notice the difference, I mean like he was willing to just get to know people. And it's not that he didn't know the differences. He did. It's just that he didn't let it prevent him from getting to know them. Now, he did grow up in the Pottawatomie County, but he ends up focusing heavily in Navajo, obviously. And it's because he worked as a journalist, moving to Santa Fe, New Mexico in 1952, and then lived in Albuquerque. During this time, he became acquainted with the sheriff of Hutchinson County, the man upon whom he would pattern the main character in his Joe Leaphorn novels. And then he proceeded to teach journalism for I guess it's almost 20 years at the University of New Mexico. Writing his novels was during that time that he was working there. He wrote 18 books in his Navajo series. He wrote more than 30 books total, and among them is a memoir and books about the Southwest, its beauty and its history, because that was really an engaging aspect for him. His literary honors were all awarded for his Navajo books, and his books have been translated into 8 languages, which is pretty incredible. Hillerman's writing is noted for the cultural details he provides about his subjects. The Blessing Way, I'm only an hour and a half in. He goes so in depth into like traditions and songs, and it's really incredible to read and see as someone who's outside of it.
It's like Tolkien level, basically.
It's just super interesting.
You're making me want to look these books up and read them because that sounds really interesting.
I think
me.
you would really like them, actually. His works in nonfiction and in fiction reflect his appreciation of the natural wonders of the American Southwest and his appreciation of its indigenous people, particularly the Navajo. His mystery novels are set in the Four Corners area of New Mexico and Arizona, sometimes reaching into Colorado and Utah, with occasional forays to the big cities of Washington, D.C., Los Angeles, and New York. The protagonists are Joe Leaphorn and Jim Chee of the Navajo Nation Police, and Lieutenant Leaphorn was introduced in the first novel, which I'm currently reading, The Blessing Way. Sergeant Jim Chee isn't introduced until the fourth novel, People of Darkness. And the two first work together, finally, not even in The Dark Wind. It's in the seventh novel, titled Skinwalkers.
These are like parallel stories that are running, or
I don't know. I'll find out. I'm unsure. Skinwalkers was considered his breakout novel, with a distinct increase in sales with the two police officers working together. Once they got that dynamic, people were really into reading those books. Hillerman repeatedly acknowledged his debt to an earlier series of mystery novels written by British-born Australian author Arthur W. Upfield and set amongst Australian Aborigines in remote desert regions of tropical and subtropical Australia. The Upfield novels were first published in 1928 and featured a half European, half Aboriginal Australian hero titled Detective Inspector Napoleon Bonaparte, but he's called Boney. That's his nickname.
I love it.
I do too. I love
Cut
it too.
it, print it. Why isn't there a series about it?
It is. It's Bones. They just Americanized it.
Just very serious. Yeah.
Boney worked with deep understanding of Aboriginal traditions, and the character was based on the achievements of an Aboriginal person known as Tracker Leon, whom Upfield had met during his years in the Australian bush. So again, a man who goes to a country and really tries to absorb the culture and honor it and pay respect to it, and isn't apt to say like, oh, this is stupid or this isn't for me or whatever, and is able to write these books that then inspire essentially Hillerman to do the same thing.
Well, and Hillerman becomes a bridge for that culture.
Correct.
In essence.
Yes. Now, when Hillerman passed away, his daughter, Anne, at the time, I knew that she took over the mantle for him, but I didn't know how that transition had occurred. And so as it turns out, she was actually writing a book about her father. Now, she wasn't known for novels. She was an author, but her first books are about like travel, New Mexico points of interest, restaurants. She had a book that she collaborated with someone on that's called Santa Fe Flavors, Best Restaurants and Recipes, kind of informational travel guide books.
It's not too different from her father, who wrote about the scenes and sights of Southwest.
Yes, a little bit.
America.
Yeah, there's a little bit of inspiration
Crossover.
there.
Yeah.
So before his death, she began a book called Tony Hillerman's Landscapes on the Road with Chee and Leaphorn, which now I'm kind of interested actually in that book because I'd really like to read that because I'm sure it has to do with where the stories are all placed and everything. So I'm sure it's really cool. That was begun before his death and includes his comments.
When did he pass?
2008. Anne gleaned a lot of the locale details from her father's novels, and her husband took the photographs. And she intended it as a book to draw in readers of his novels, a guide for the reader to visualize the New Mexico and Arizona sites from the perspective of the two main protagonists. Now, after her father passed and this book was completed, she continued the Leaphorn and Chee series. But she actually is the one who introduces Bernadette. And she is the reason that Bernadette becomes a piece of it. And that is why now the subtitles on all of the books say a Leaphorn, Chee, and Manuelito novel, where it used to just say a Leaphorn and Chee novel.
Ladies standing up for ladies.
Arguably, Anne Hillerman is your favorite author, Charity.
Yeah, maybe. I think you should read them, actually. I think you'd really like it. She wrote as recently as this last year. So, like, we're still going strong with the material for the show, just so you guys know. This could be going on for some time.
Unlike some people.
Unlike some people
you're
on
gonna
the
say
show.
the same thing?
I even
That
have
is
it,
so
I have
funny.
it in my notes right here. Robert Redford was like, "You need to make a move. Everybody's waiting." I'm like, "He's talking about wins a winner, George."
Maybe
I
there's
love
like a
that.
secret spoiler about when his next Game of Thrones book is going to be released finally.
Yeah, what's it been? 13 years? Come on, George.
It's been a long time.
I
Yeah.
will say, if you watch IGN Fest today, you may have gotten a hint about the possibility.
Kind of off subject, but it's been so long now, I would have to go back and reread all of the books, and I'm not doing that because those books are super dense.
Just to kind of cap that, George R.R. Martin, whom we're talking about, by the way, who made a cameo on the show with Robert Redford, which you saw, he was in an interview during IGN Fest. It was quite great, actually. Again, link in the description, hopefully.
I messaged Jenna when I was watching this the first time, and I was like, "Oh my God, Robert Redford and George R.R. Martin are in this episode." She goes, "Yeah, that was my first day working. No pressure or anything."
How
Ugh.
overwhelming. Okay, I did forget to state how large the Navajo Nation is, so I just want to do that really quickly. Roughly 17,544,500 acres. It's the largest Indian reservation in the United States, exceeding the size of 10 U.S. states.
I
It's
want to say it's like
large.
27,000 square miles or something like that.
Yeah, 27,413 square miles.
Yeah.
I think they may have mentioned it on the show, too. Is that what you're saying?
I believe it's in the episode.
I think it's when Chee first joins the force and Bernadette is like, "You don't want to get stuck out here without water. It's 27,000 square miles of desert." I haven't driven in that exact area, but I have driven through northern Arizona. It is beautiful in its own way. I'm more of I want lush greenery, tropical southern girl.
Being from the Middle East, it's what drew me to the Southwest. I do love the mesas and the sagebrush, and the occasional pitter patter of rain when that happens produces this really just magnificent smell that you do not get in New York City, just so you know.
It's called
Oh, yeah, that
petrichor.
makes sense.
What is it? It's like when the grass is greener.
It's like feeling like you're at home even when you're not at home. It's the same reason that so many Scottish people moved to the mountains of North Carolina when they immigrated here, because it reminded them of the mountains of Scotland.
What's the people that moved to Minnesota? It was like some sort
Oh,
of
it's
sweet
Scandinavians.
Scandinavians.
Scandinavian.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're like, why did we go to well, it's arguably warmer, but not by
But
much.
but that's what you're acclimated to. That's what you're used to. If you're used to living in Scandinavian territories and you try to move to Florida, you're gonna suffer a lot.
I just remember this Lewis Black skit, I think from 2000 and I want to say 2, and he spent 20 whole minutes just taking down, because he was in Minnesota doing the show, just taking down the whole audience, because why would your people move here? Doesn't make sense to a Jew from New York. Doesn't at all.
I wanted to mention in The Blessing Way, there's a character that's talking about the names of the areas. I don't remember the direct translation, but that white people came to that area and called it a desert, but that the word that the Navajo had for it was Beautiful Valley. Hillerman was trying to show the difference even just in those little things.
In perception.
The desert conversation reminded me of that. Tony Hillerman is actually one of my late grandfather's favorite authors, and one of the few gifts that he gave Travis before he passed was a few different Tony Hillerman books. Those are like cherished possessions in my house. That's why I'm willing to watch this show, because it kind of holds this intrinsic spot for me as like someone who's very sentimental about my grandfather.
I actually only started watching it because I noticed it was post Fear. I was looking for something new to watch, and I saw that George R.R. Martin and Robert Redford were the executive producers, and I was like, oh, I'm all over that. Luckily, they had released 2 episodes at the same time. I watched both, and that kind of got me hooked. So I've actually watched from the beginning since it was released.
Season 1 was a very slow burn.
Yeah, when I watched the first episode, I was like, I could take it or leave it. If they hadn't released 2 episodes, I don't know if I would have picked it up again. Takes a while for you to even figure out what's going on, what the point is.
That's intentional, right? The out of sequence shots that we get, which obviously continues into season 2 as well. We get kind of like these sneak peeks, and you're like, oh, okay, so it has to do with this. And then psych, it has nothing to do with that. Because that's how both seasons were. Oh, it's going to have to do with this bank robbery. No, it doesn't. Not really. Kind of, but hardly. And then the second season is like, oh, it's going to have to do with this guy shooting up this trailer. Not really. Also, again, I thought the guy who played
The blonde man.
Colt Wolf.
from that black and white shot at the beginning of season 2, I actually thought from the side profile, I thought he was Viggo Mortensen for a second. And I was like, Viggo Mortensen's in the show? This is crazy. He doesn't look anything like him. So don't know where that came
That
from.
guy was so freaky. He was perfect choice to play that. Just his look was so
To
terrifying.
be fair, I just watched the movie Longlegs, which has a lot to do with dolls and is like so terrifying and horrible. And it's just it's a new Nicolas Cage movie. And Nicolas Cage never stops whipping out these bangers of movies that are horrifying and unsettling. And I'm like, how do you continue to do it, sir? For a while there, you were just making movies to pay off your taxes, but now you're making good ones and they're really freaking me out. Anyway, he plays like a doll maker in it. It's terrifying. I maybe just ruined the whole movie by saying that. So sorry. Anyway, carefully placing the bomb into the doll and then like tying it up. It really reminded me of that and I didn't like it. I hate everything about this.
Joe is a very different character from the character that Zahn McClarnon plays on Reservation Dogs. He's a cop on that show too.
I will say in that same Reddit thread where people were discussing like how this wasn't super great or accurate, their go-to show for accuracy was Reservation Dogs.
I just started watching Reservation Dogs a couple of days ago, and it's really cute. And the girl that plays the pregnant girl, she's in it also.
Oh, okay.
But the character that he plays is so different. He's like this really laid-back cop. He doesn't really follow what's going on. They stole some stuff. They're like terrified that he's going to figure it out, and he's just like, hey, what's up? You guys be careful now. Don't let me catch you eating those chips.
I have to say, I might be in love with Zahn McClarnon. There's just something about him. He's so handsome. This entire cast is ridiculously attractive, for the record. How?
Yeah, incredibly unrealistic, right?
Yeah, we're the uggos.
Well, this is
Because I'm
TV,
one and I'm
so
feeling unrepresented. I'm just kidding.
He's generally credited as like the best part of season 2 of Westworld because he played the Native
I
American.
didn't watch beyond season 1.
There was an entire episode dedicated to the Native American population from Westworld. It was a love story with he and his Westworld wife. It was really beautiful, actually. He was in stuff before that, but I think that's what kickstarted him into my view anyway.
Well, let me touch on that because if you're like, why does this guy look familiar to me? That's because he's been in a ton of stuff. He was in Longmire, as you mentioned, Reservation Dogs, Dr. Sleep, Fargo.
What was he in Dr. Sleep?
Crow Daddy.
Oh, he was.
He also did the movie Crazy Horse back in 1996. He also did a voice in Spirit, the DreamWorks animation
the
movie.
horse movie.
Yeah. He was also in the show Timeless, which had kind of a cult following. He also did voiceover work in My Neighbor Totoro, which is kind of wild. He's been around for many, many years, active since the 80s, becoming really, really active after the 2000s, especially in recent years, because I think people are just really seeing how phenomenally talented he is. He's kind of like that guy, I think, previous to probably about 2015.
Yeah.
Because I think he was just in a lot of things. He was recognizable because there's just something about his smile that I think is like really memorable. I don't know. There's something about him. So he kind of sticks in your brain, but he had like a lot of smaller roles. Joe Leaphorn, our main protagonist. If you're saying he's the opposite of Reservation Dogs, I mean, really, he's very uptight, plays things really close to the vest.
Very by the book.
Yes.
In season 1.
Not so much in season 2, but it got personal.
How far can you push someone? And he was pushed far enough that he finally broke. I was reading some stuff about the show, and it's like there's a balance between being justice and being Native American. Obviously, the scales are tipped out of favor for Native Americans. I guess it's the battle that Native Americans have fought ever since white people did what they did. Finding a balance between being in society and being your native self, if that makes sense. And that's a balance that they are still having to strike today.
Joe is the sheriff of the specific outpost. Apparently he lives in the Navajo capital, Kayenta. It's Window Rock, Arizona, where this is located. He comes off as really harsh at the beginning, so you're not quite sure, but he's quite funny. His jokes are phenomenal. They're great. You have to get to know him before he shows that. He's got a really hard exterior.
His parents gave him to the Indian school, correct?
Correct. Well, they told him he should go, and so I believe he willingly went then to obey his parents.
Okay. His parents wanted him to walk that line. Even his parents, because the whole thing with his dad is mad that he went to college and had the chance to escape living on the reservation, and he chose to stay and do the same job his dad did and didn't move forward. He went to the school to please his parents, but he was torn also and didn't want to go into society. I don't remember if they ever said exactly why he decided to stay.
Well, the parents say that it's Emma's fault. She dragged him back. He doesn't view it that way. That's his wife. They made the decision together. He's not one to just willingly go along with whatever. So I'm sure he had a large say in it when they determined that they were going to move back to the reservation. I don't think that they really go into much detail. Now, to be fair, that story may still be coming because until season 2, I assumed his parents had passed.
Right, same. He never mentions them really in the first season.
No.
As a matter of fact, I didn't realize it was his dad that came to help him defuse the bomb the first time. He didn't even say it then. I didn't realize it until he went to visit him
and
later.
a lot of the time he refers to him by his first name.
Right, Henry. Again, you'd think that a dad would be proud of his son picking up the mantle to do good.
Well, he views it as stagnancy. He chose the same life that I had, and I wanted better for my son, and I gave him the opportunity, and he chose not to take it. It's complicated. This is the mid to late 60s that all of this is happening. There's a lot of different things going on. A lot of civil rights stuff is happening for a lot of different people.
Especially younger people watching the show, they may not realize what it was like in the 70s for Native Americans. Native Americans still don't get the respect and the rights that they should. And in the 60s and 70s, it was way worse. While African Americans were getting civil rights, Native Americans were still not. Even today, there's a lot of issues with law enforcement and justice on tribal lands.
All I know about it is really what's been portrayed in Hollywood, so it's probably inaccurate, but it's constantly about jurisdictional issues. The one thing that really is prominent in season 1 and season 2 is this concept of unwanted, unknown sterilizations occurring amongst Native women who are attending these clinics. This is a horrifying reality in history. History is horrifying all the way back.
Right.
From the very beginning, it's all been pretty horrible. People are pretty awful to each other. And this has become more of a topic of conversation in recent years because a lot of TV shows are now covering it.
Yellowstone touched on it with Beth.
Her brother took her to get a procedure for an unwanted child. They can't go to town. He takes her to the one on the res, and she is sterilized. She's 16 at the time. She's really young.
Yeah, he knew, but he didn't tell her.
Was a decision made for her at such a young age that she didn't have any say in. And that's how it was for these women, period, all the time. I loved Emma's line at the end about how could people treat us like cattle and cull the herd. What kind of nation would do that? It's a hard bit of history to look at.
Not only would they do the procedure, but I would assume they would never tell them. So those women would just go for the rest of their lives and never have children and never understand why they didn't conceive again.
I think because there were Native women involved in some of the clinics, I imagine they would know it eventually. Over time, that probably was spread around by word of mouth, which is exactly the work that Emma is doing. She does it in the first season. She does it in the second season. She will speak Danae in front of the white doctors who cannot speak it to tell these women, do not come back to this clinic to have your child. If you do, you will never have a child again. And that was really brave. And I imagine there were women that did that.
Her taking the step to allow the publication of the article about it end of the second season is a huge step and extremely dangerous for her and for everybody that works there.
I'm very interested to see kind of where season 3 goes as a result of that. Joe Jr.'s storyline is wrapped up now. We know who did it. We know why it happened. Joe and Emma have a son named Joe Jr. who unfortunately passed before our time with them.
His death is the overarching storyline of season 1 and season 2, finding out what happened to Joe Jr.
Yes, because he works an oil rig. There's an accidental, quote unquote, explosion at this mine. We come to find out that it was intentional. Why did it have to happen during the day? I don't know. That was an excellent question that Joe asks BJ Vines when he confronts him about what's happening. And we finally get the answer that it's all about money the whole time.
Yeah. There's uranium in the mine, and so he could mine the uranium. BJ Vines arranged the explosion so that he could buy the land really cheap, which is something that's going on because I see articles about it in my news feed all the time about Navajo land rights and uranium mines.
Oh, yeah. Well, I'm sure some of this is based in the reality of the mineral deposits and stuff that are available there, why that land has been fought over. We've talked about Joe Leaphorn and also his son. Emma is played by Deanna Tausche Allison. I did not recognize her from anything previous to this. She has been in a couple other things, but it was like voiceover stuff. She did The Batman back in the early 2000s. She was in Accused, which is a TV show, but just for like an episode. She was also in a TV movie called Edge of America. That's really it. She doesn't have much acting credit beyond that, but I like her. I think she does a great job of playing a very intentionally reserved woman, much like her husband. Just two peas in a pod, these two. She plays it also very close to the vest a lot.
Emma is definitely very much more in tune with the native side of their marriage. She's the one that knows all the ceremonies, and she's the one that says we need to do this, and she knows all of the legends and all of the stories and all of that. And, she's the one that organizes all of those things. Whereas Joe goes along with her, but I don't feel like he has a super deep connection to the native side.
We don't know Emma's past. We don't know if she went to the schools either, but that might have something to do with it.
You have Joe, who went to one of the schools, not super deeply connected to it. He does the things because Emma wants him to, which is not to say that he doesn't have his own thing, because he does his own little things here and there. And then you have Bernadette, who was forced to go to one of the schools, and in retaliation, I feel like when she came out, she cleaved even more into the Native American culture and belief system. She knows all about the medicine bags and all of the things you do for spells and all of that stuff. And then you have Chee, who stayed on the reservation his whole life until he could leave. And he doesn't want anything to do with his Native American side on the first two seasons. Until the end of the second season, he takes the medicine and all that. I find it interesting that the one who stayed on the res is the one who has the least interest in it, and the one who was forced to leave is the one who has the most interest in it, and the one who made the choice to go is kind of in the middle.
I think it has a lot to do with, again, how that would feel to try to find your place in society. Chee wants to be in regular American society. He is trying to separate himself from his roots.
Because he's been forced to live on the reservation. He doesn't know what's out there. He wants to go out and see what's out there. So for him, it's a draw. But whereas Bernadette has been there, if you watch 1923, you know what those schools were like. So Bernadette, who was forced to go to one of those schools, reacted in the way that I'm going to be even more into my culture and my heritage.
Which is so unusual because at the end of season 2, Chee is staying at least for a little while to help out.
And Bernadette is the one who's leaving.
Bernadette is leaving, which is, And now she says, she's like, I could always come back. And we'll have to see how that plays out because, like I said, Bernadette becomes such a beloved character in the novels. So I have a feeling she'll come back, but I don't know when.
She's my favorite character. So
Bernadette Manuelita is played by Jessica Matten. Jessica Matten has been in several other things. Frontier is probably one of the more notable. And then also in an upcoming project, actually, on The Last Airbender. She'll be doing voiceover work for that. This movie, this is interesting. It's produced by LeBron James. I know. It's called Resball. It's done by one of the co-creators from Reservation Dogs, a 2024 American sports drama film directed by Sidney Freeland. It's based on a nonfiction sport novel called Canyon Dreams, a baseball season on the Navajo Nation. Probably worth a watch. And her co-star, Kiowa Gordon, who plays Chee, is also in it. Bernadette is very spiritual.
And she believes.
She's a very strong faith. A very, very strong faith.
Even to the point of believing in the witch in season 1.
Well, and it would appear based on just what other people say in the show on the res, I don't know that everybody does believe that. So it's like her faith is even maybe a little more old school than other people her age. She's super tough and struggling to be a woman in the late 60s, trying to make a name for herself in law enforcement. In season 1, you kind of see her come into her own. And then in season 2, you find out that because she doesn't have a way to move up in their small justice system on the res, she determines that she wants to apply for Border Patrol because the United States passed a law stating that they had to accept Native Americans into their programs. So she applies and she does receive it because she's incredibly talented and good at her job. And she just passed her lieutenant exams. And so she determines to leave at the end of season 2, which, like we said, I don't know. We'll have to see what happens there. But again, at the beginning of season 2, I expected her and Chee to be like together, and Chee's not even on the res anymore. He
left to be a private investigator.
There's all of this stuff happens in between seasons that you're like, wait, what? You're like still catching up. And I imagine that'll happen again because things are going to change and you're going to be like, I have to catch up again. Chee, or Jim Chee, is played by Kiowa Gordon. You may recognize him if you're slightly younger than me as someone who was in the Twilight movies. He played Embry Call. I was a little bit too old for Twilight, but he was in Twilight New Moon and Twilight Eclipse and Twilight Breaking Dawn. So kind of a big deal. He played Flint Maines in the reboot of the TV show Roswell, late 90s, early 2000s. He was also in Blood Quantum, a TV miniseries called The Liberator, and again in Resballs as well with his co-star from Dark Winds.
One of my favorite scenes with Chee is when he's taking the little kid to his mom after his father is killed.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so sweet. But you know what bugs me? Is the kid leaves his suitcase in the back of Chee's car.
They do just drive off with none of his belongings.
Yes, they drive off without his suitcase.
Where was your continuity person? Whatever their title is, I forget.
I like his journey. In season 1, he is actually an FBI agent, but he's being sly and sneaky at the behest of our friend Noah Emmerich. Emmerich?
I said Emmerich. Dave said it's Emmerich.
Right.
I don't know. I'm probably wrong.
Our friend from The Walking Dead.
Our friend Dr. Jenner.
You know, he doesn't have any qualms about it until he goes back to the res and realizes that all these people that he was trying to get away from, it's not the same as it was when he was a little kid. Even still, at the end of season 1, he still doesn't come back. He goes off and works on his own.
I mean, he does. He comes back to his property and he's like planning on living there. And then all of a sudden we don't know what happened with that.
Right. Well, then he decided I'm going to private investigator. But by the end of season 1, he is going to work on the res for Joe. I love his 70s outfits.
Oh, wow. I loved that he was like, this is the future. And here's the thing. He's right. He's right. That is the future. Those ridiculous leisure suits stay around for like all of the 70s with those huge collars and the deep V-necks. That sticks around. So he was not wrong. But I love that the little boy stretched out his collar as he was leaving. It was so cute to try to be like Chee. Chee and Bernadette are also hot and cold, slow burn romance here. Enemies to lovers, you might say.
This is maybe something that happened because of being in the school. Because she's very private. She doesn't want anybody in her space. If I recall, the only reason she lets him in is because of the eclipse. He's very respectful. He doesn't try to force his way in or anything like that.
The story of her dating Elvis was insane, and I absolutely loved it. I was like, this is crazy in the best possible way. What a piece of pop culture. She was stationed in Germany because she served, and while she's there, she goes on a date with Elvis Presley. And not as impressive as you would think it would be. And I imagine that's how it was for a lot of women who dated Elvis Presley, because he dated a lot of women, because he dated so many women. I imagine that was kind of the case for a lot of them, was like, okay, well, it's cool that I can tell people I did this. But she wants absolutely no one to know that she went on a date with Elvis Presley, which is very funny, but just kind of encapsulates who Bernadette is as a person.
I think she wants to be taken seriously. Telling people that you went on a date with Elvis could definitely skew people into seeing that you are not a serious person. She's a woman in law enforcement and Native American. 3 strikes against her. And in order to fit in, well, as women, we have to be careful no matter what we do.
She wants to avoid being hyper feminine in order to kind of undo all the work that she does.
As a woman and a Native American, she has to work 3 times as hard as a white person would to be considered and accepted into the job. And so she can't afford to be seen any other way.
I imagine, honestly, anywhere at this time, women in law enforcement is rare.
Yeah, oh, for sure.
Also, it was like not a thing. We're heading into the era where divorce kind of started to become big and women were working more. But prior to this, we're talking 1950s, a lot of women are just at home.
Stepford wives.
Yeah. Elva Guerra plays Sally Growing Thunder, the young pregnant girl who happens upon the clinic that Emma works in. Turns out she is carrying the child of Benjamin So, who's not actually Benjamin So. It's the twin brother, James. Not willingly. is what I'm going to say about that. But that was not a willing situation.
No, and obviously by the time we see her in the clinic, it's way too late to do anything about it.
Yeah, she's very far along.
I feel like she was kept prisoner in that house until she had to go to the doctor, so there was nothing
it was
that could be done.
such a weird dynamic because she doesn't know anything about the Dene culture. She knows the language, but she doesn't understand a lot of the traditions or any of the things that would have been taught because her mother is so involved in this witchcraft. Really, that's all she's seeing.
Because Emma had to teach her everything about the ceremonies and how to wrap the baby in the board and all that stuff.
Elva Guerra has been in Reservation Dogs, as you mentioned. She played a character in Rutherford Falls, which was a sitcom, but that is really it. She's kind of newer to acting. She's young, so it'll be interesting to see where her career kind of takes her. And she leaves at the end of season 2, and so we're unsure as to what is going to happen to that character as well. I would argue her feelings are valid. I'm not trying to invalidate them, but a lot of what she says about how like the baby hates her because he's trapped her here, a lot of that is probably postpartum depression. It's not a thing at this time frame. Hysteria would have been just what that was referred to.
Well, also she has to recognize that if she stays there, everybody will know where he came from. That's part of being trapped there, in the opinion of all the people, which Joe and Emma love her. They're not judgmental. They are great. But you know how people are, especially in communities. There's going to be talk, and that child is already going to have a difficult life, and now it's going to be extra difficult.
And I would argue that even though Joe and Emma do love her, for Emma, she mentions, I did this to heal myself because I'm grieving the loss of my son. And having a little baby boy in the house feels nice to her. And she says, she's like, that's not fair to Sally. And so at the end of the season, Sally leaves a letter and she takes her baby and she goes. And I wasn't sure how that was going to play out because of how Sally was talking about the baby. I was like, is she going to end up leaving the baby there with them? But no, she decides, I'm going to try this with my child and I'm going to leave and try this on my own. It's the right decision.
Well, she's going to have it hard, though, because where's she going to go?
She's going to have it hard, but it's going to be her decision. To this point, nothing has been her decision.
Exactly.
Really.
Yeah.
It's what's best for her. We'll have to see if that will play out further. I hope that we'll hear from her again.
The surrounding cast of characters. So we have the stoner who gets his fingers bitten off by the alien goat.
By the alien goat. That was wild. Let me mention the Atcities because they play a part in both seasons also. So Guy Atcity is the father of Joe Jr.'s girlfriend at the time that he passes. I cannot remember her character's name.
Anna.
She is murdered at the beginning of season 1. So that brings up feelings for Joe, obviously. Now, Joe and Guy have not spoken since Joe shot Guy in the leg because Guy came at him. And so we do see a flashback eventually to figure out what happened there. And their friendship is mended by the end of season 1 because Guy goes through the same thing that Joe does, the loss of a child, and then begins to understand a little bit more why Joe behaved the way he did.
He actually ends up saving them at the end of season 1.
He has been in other things, kind of a random assortment of stuff. He's also in Resball. Resball apparently just swooped up the Dark Winds cast and was like, come on over, we're making a movie. He has also been in some other native projects like Fry Bread, Face, and Me. He did some voiceover work in Saving Bikini Bottom, the Sandy Cheeks movie, which is like a SpongeBob movie. He was also in Rutherford Falls. He was in Yellowstone as like a tribal member. He's in Succession, From Dusk Till Dawn, the television series. He was in one episode of Breaking Bad. He was in one episode of Longmire. He played the Good Samaritan in Breaking Bad. On your next watch through of Breaking Bad, you'll have to look out for him. It should be noted that he is actually Dene. Not a lot of people in the show are. They're of other indigenous tribes. And he has also done camera and electrical department work and has directed.
Oh, wow.
In 2011 is when his acting passion emerged. He has a BFA in New Media Art from the Institute of American Indian Arts in Santa Fe, New Mexico. He's well educated and versed in this specific thing. He's written and directed numerous short films, music videos, PSAs, all sorts of stuff. He's done a lot in the amount of time that he's been in the field. Guy saves them in the first season and comes in to give a shocking revelation in the second season. They call a guy in. He comes into the sheriff's office. They're like, hey, we're looking for, what was his name? Lebec? And he's like, what are you talking about? He's right there. He's the blonde man, which was crazy. So hopefully we'll see him again in season 3. I imagine we will. He seems like he's a long-term character.
I want to know what's up with the weird horned goat.
Oh, that goat was so unusual.
It was never really addressed in season 2. I'm hoping it's something that continues. They do mention Navajo code talkers in the show.
They do, yeah.
During World War II, when Americans were trying to send code that couldn't be broken, there were only a handful of Navajo speakers. And so they created a code, and they would use Navajo troops to send the codes back and forth. It's really important. They won the war.
It was hugely important. It was a pivotal part of the war, and I think earned...
Speaking of another Nicolas Cage movie.
Oh, yeah, that's true. Guy's wife is named Helen Attidy. We don't see a ton from her. She's played by a woman named Desba. She is also a citizen of Dene Nation. She's done a ton of stuff, acting, screenwriting, directing, producer of indie films. She was in an episode of Lawmen Bass Reeves, which I haven't watched, but I've heard really great things about. When You Finish Saving the World, Woman Walks Ahead. Looks like a lot of indie films. Also, Longmire, which you'll see a lot of the people in Dark Winds also made appearances in Longmire because they went out of their way to try to hire native cast for Longmire to do justice in telling those stories, which are also based on novels and are also about detectives. So it's kind of one big loop there with a lot of stuff that kind of all relates back to itself. I guess we should mention the bad guys in both seasons. Arguably, there are a lot of bad guys in the first season. Benjamin So, or Father So, not really.
Who played Victor on Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul.
Yeah, Jeremiah Batsui. He's been in a ton of stuff. He started his acting career back in '94 in Natural Born Killers.
Wow.
Which is just like a really cool fact about him. He was in Lords of Dogtown, Flags of Our Fathers. He was also in Fry Bread, Face and Me. For TV, he was in Into the West, Wildfire, Breaking Bad, CSI Miami, The Night Shift, Longmire, Yellowstone, Bosch, and now has been in Chicago PD. We're talking prime time now, people. This just came out. It's called American Primeval. It is a Netflix show, so I have not watched it, but it's an American Western miniseries that is set in 1857 during the Utah War. He does play a native character in that as well. There have been some really notable names in the show. John Deal, who plays BJ Vines.
Jerry Ryan.
Which was wild. And also, Jerry Ryan, how old are you? 57. How does she look that good at age 57?
Also, I love that she was the one that actually kickstarted the whole season 2 storyline.
I love
by
it.
Sending him after the box to actually get rid of her
he's the
husband.
Worst.
Girl power, Jerry.
Just to get rid of him because, yeah, the worst. First season also features Jonathan Adams, who is very much of that guy. You recognize him and you maybe don't know why. He was in Air Bud. You can believe it. Osmosis Jones.
Oh my God.
He did voicing for The Death of Superman, Planes, Elemental, Justice League Crisis on Infinite Earths. He's done a lot of work. For TV, he was in an episode of Frasier. He was in an episode of Walker, Texas Ranger. He was in an episode of Felicity. He was in an episode of Crossing Jordan. He was in a whole season of Bones. He played Daniel Goodman. I imagine Rachel would remember that. He was in an episode of One Tree Hill, of The Closer, NCIS, 24, Medium, Boston Legal, Numbers, endless stuff. Desperate Housewives. I mean, we're talking like if it's been a hit TV show and people talked about it at a water cooler, he's probably been in it. No Ordinary Family, Burn Notice. He's been in so much, and he continues to do voice work predominantly for comic book properties. Green Lantern, the animated series, Hulk and the Agents of Smash. The reason I recognized him is he was in Last Man Standing. He played the neighbor, Chuck Larrabee, and he did that for the entire run of the show. Once Upon a Time, he was in 2 episodes of The Orville. He played Lester in season 1, and I don't know, I hope we see him back, honestly. I enjoyed seeing him in it. I thought it was fun. Rainn Wilson is also in season 1 as a sleazy car salesman.
I forgot about him. Yep.
None other than The Office's own Dwight Schrute.
He was about as anti-Dwight in
Devoted
that.
Dan is gross. He's a sleazy car salesman who runs on the platform of I'm a Christian, so you should trust me and buy cars for me, but really I'm sleeping with
Really,
women
I'm
out in these
banging
trucks.
people in my shagging van I've got over here on the lot.
Yeah, it's super gross. Super, super gross. So Henry Leaphorn is played by Joseph Running Fox. And the picture that they have up for him is so old because he has been around for a long time as an actor. He was in Porky's 2, which is just like, what? An episode of Saint Elsewhere. He's got some old pulls. And really, he had kind of stopped acting for a long time. He was really active in 80s and 90s. And then it kind of stopped for a little while. And then he did a TV movie called A Thief of Time, which is also based on a Tony Hillerman novel. Fun fact, that was in 2004. And then he's not in any other projects until 2012. And then his last work before Dark Winds was actually 2019. We also get A. Martinez. His name is actually Adolfo Martinez. He's named after his great-grandfather, so he was referred to as Little A. And so A became his name. A. Martinez played the sheriff in season 2.
He was also on my favorite soap, Days of Our Lives.
He was on Days of Our Lives.
My second favorite soap, Santa Barbara. He played Cruz Castillo, and he was married to Marcy Capwell.
He's well known as a soap actor, which is kind of fun.
When I saw him show up on the show, I was like, hey, that's awesome.
Bold and Beautiful, Longmire as well. He was rumored to be in The Young and the Restless, which then I would have recognized him because that was one of my soaps that I watched. And then he was also on The Night Shift. It was a General Hospital spinoff. And then, Days of Our Lives as Eddie Hernandez. I have the utmost respect for soap actors. They do that
every day.
Every day. It's insane.
Yeah. They only have like a 2-week gap. The entire movie Tootsie was about that.
Yeah.
The film got messed up, so they had to go live because they couldn't make it up. But they literally have to film like an hour show every day.
It's crazy to me.
Yeah.
Mary Landon is played by Jacqueline Byers. She's the reporter in the second season who's kind of trying to get her big scoop on this story that is very important to get it out there. It's interesting to see a woman on the reservation trying to get information from these women who just do not really want to tell her anything. She is eventually successful. She convinces a woman who works with Emma to let her come to a meeting that they're having.
Wasn't it At City's Wife?
Oh, yeah. It may have been Helen.
Wife, yeah.
And she's been in a lot of one-off things. The Strain, which is why she looked familiar to me. An episode of Timeless. She's done a handful of movies. Eugene Braverock played Frank Nakai, who is one of the bad guys from the first season. He's working with, we're just going to call him Benjamin So, even though that's not his name, because it's really what we're referred to him as the entire season until like the second to last episode. Is dating the witch. He's like a super tough looking guy, but even he believes that Benjamin has gone too far by the end of the season.
I also wonder if Dr. Jenner is going to show up again sometime in the future, because they said at the end of season 1 that the money in his body was not in the cave anymore.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah. So there's a chance he could pop up.
Maybe that's what season 3 is about.
Could
Who
be.
knows?
I don't know.
See, you guys had said Jenner was the one who disappeared, but it was Frank Nakai that disappeared. They found Jenner's body. We keep calling him Jenner. High Pockets.
Widover.
Is that what his name was? Okay.
Widover.
Widover was gone and the money was gone. They found Frank Nakai.
They didn't find the money. I know that.
I don't know. Now I'm second guessing myself.
Well, the reason why I thought it was significant that it was Frank Nakai was because he keeps saying, like Morgan, I never die. I can't be killed, which would make more sense. Now we have to find out the truth. Just like 1969 versus 1972. The second moon landing, people.
AI is telling me that it was Nakai.
Yeah, Chee dropped the rifle money in Widover's body back into the cave to cover for Anna's dad killing Widover. Oh, man. We had it totally wrong.
Just don't tell David. He'll never know.
So Eugene Braverock was in The Revenant, Wonder Woman, minor roles, but some big title things. He also was in the 2007 historical drama TV movie Bury My Heart at Wounded Knee.
Oh.
Which is a heartbreaking story. This was done for HBO. If you have time to watch it, I truly recommend it.
The book is heartbreaking.
It's a nonfiction book and it's hard. It was on a TV show that was one of my personal favorites, and I only watched it because of The Walking Dead, called Hell on Wheels. It was on AMC. It used to air immediately following The Walking Dead. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was really great. If you're looking for the representation of where America was at during the railroads being built, but also post-slavery, there's like freed men, but there's also natives and there's also immigrants from Ireland and China.
I just listened to a podcast about the building of the Transcontinental Railroad. They talked about Hell on Wheels. It was basically a movable town that would follow where the railroad was being built.
It's a really interesting television show. I believe it was canceled, I think, really before it was able to get truly into a lot of it, but it's great. And he is also currently on Resident Alien from 2021 to present. He played Shane. I know you've been watching that, Rachel. The only person we really haven't talked about is the witch, who is played by Amelia Rico. Unfortunately, she comes from a tribe that was lost to colonization, according to her biography on IMDb. But she is indigenous, and she was called Ada Growing Thunder, or the Witch is what she's prominently referred to as. And she has also been in 1923, an episode of Grey's Anatomy, an episode of Walker, an episode of Yellowstone. She's been acting for a while as well, and it looks like predominantly shorts and like single episodes of some pretty large shows, actually. And then the only other person we haven't talked about is Colton Wolfe, who's played by Nicholas Logan and is actually a redhead, which is how he looks so fair-skinned. We might be related.
Freaky.
He's actually from Atlanta, Georgia, so I feel for you, my pale-skinned brother. You're probably constantly sunburned. He has also been in a ton of stuff. He was in The Last Stop in Yuma County, smaller stuff, a TV miniseries called Dope Sick. He was in an episode of Creep Show, which is cool. That's our second season tie into the Walking Dead universe somehow. Is he's technically worked with Greg Nicotero.
Hey,
so we'll count
6
it.
degrees, man.
We're keeping it related every season because season 3 will have Jenna Elfman in it. And as we know, she was June in Fear the Walking Dead. We're trying to keep it related to The Walking Dead in any way. If there's a connection, we will find it. Not even 6 degrees, within 2, undoubtedly. That really covers everyone who was in the show up to this point. We've touched on a lot of the different storylines by talking about the characters, so that was probably a good call.
They did touch on when she was trying to get the young Native American guy to go for the draft. He was arguing, like, why should I go fight for a country that won't even recognize me as a citizen? It was very, very germane in the 60s and 70s.
Yeah, and it was unfortunate because kind of that, along with what happened with BJ Vines, he gets away from justice because he's able to bail himself out. And we know that he does receive native justice after the fact, but Joe can't even share that with Bernadette. So she'll never know. Him not receiving that justice is the reason that she leaves, because she feels like none of it's right. And she was the one who believed that things could and would be different. She is the optimistic one of them who believes that eventually, maybe, the United States will care about our people. And she believes that serving is a privilege.
Spoiler alert, Bernadette.
I know. That kind of gives you, I think, a clue in on our thoughts and feelings on season 1 and 2.
It's hard to give a good opinion, I guess, because I did not give this show the attention that I probably should have. I'll sit and watch for as long as I can, then I have to go do something, and then I come back and I pick it up again. I'm not loving it.
Okay. It doesn't have to be for everyone. It's all right.
Yeah. But I also feel like just listening to you guys talk about it, obviously I missed huge chunks that were probably pretty important.
Maybe approaching this from a one episode at a time perspective will be easier.
Will be different.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I watched season 2 in one day.
Oh, girl, same.
Well, I watched it a week ago.
I put it off for as long as possible because I'm a procrastinator. But I watched 2 episodes last night and I watched all the rest of it today.
Luckily, they're only 6-episode seasons.
Yeah, I know. Thank God. Otherwise, I was really going to be screwed.
I was able to get the entire season in one day. And I felt a certain amount of pressure to get it done. And so I felt rushed while I was trying to watch it and I couldn't enjoy it.
I hope then for our sake that, and for your sake, that season 3 can be more enjoyable because we'll take it one at a time.
Yeah.
Some shows you just have to watch episode to episode.
Yes.
Yeah, I think this one is really heavy. So it is hard to binge. And so watching all of it at once was really draining.
It's also a show that you need to pay attention to. You got to sit and focus on it.
Yeah.
You can't do what I do. When I watch any show, I'm up and down and all around and like I watch shows that you don't have to pay attention because you come back in 10 minutes and the same thing's happening. So
Obviously, Sharon D really enjoyed it. For me, it holds a personal relevance that I didn't know would come from a show about Native Americans.
it's different than the kind of show I normally watch.
I watched this
Very different.
before I knew Jenna was going to be on it, so I love this show organically, not just because
actually,
Jenna
you
was
and
on it.
I had a conversation when you first started watching it because I started it at the same time. I only watched like the first 2 episodes and then I stopped. You kept going and you were like, it gets really good. And so when Dave was like, should we cover it? I sat down and I watched all of season 1 and I was like, while this is unusual for us to cover because it's not in the horror vein and it's not in the supernatural vein, it is an AMC show. So I guess if we're talking that, then I guess kind of it does.
Well, me,
because we covered Better Call Saul.
Yeah.
And that was also out of the realm of what we normally do, but it was an AMC show. So if we're going by those rules, then I guess this kind of also plays into that. But it is engaging. It does keep you guessing. And the characters are extremely likable. I fear for them, honestly. How many times is Chee going to get shot? Can this guy just like not get shot a season?
Now it's something that just has to happen.
I don't know, Rachel, if he gets shot one more time, he might be your type.
No, right? He gets cuter every season.
If you're watching this on YouTube, and I hope that you are because we need them views, go ahead and give us a like on this video and also subscribe if you're not already, you big old dummy. And if you're watching us on Spotify or wherever else, and you're like, hey, I don't really care if I watch you on Spotify, move on over to YouTube because again, we need those views so we can get monetized.
Hey, everybody, it's your friend Dave, just checking in with you as you've just finished listening to our recap of seasons 1 and 2, mostly going through the characters and some of the narrative along the way, the things that we enjoyed, the things that we may be getting ready to tie in. I wanted to thank you for hanging in as long as you have. Without further ado, here is our discussion on the season 3 premiere of Dark Winds, titled Yet Eat So, aka Big Monster. What I noticed between seasons 1 and season 2, as we move forward in time, I feel like we get to know the characters' backstories a lot more because, take for example, in this episode, Chee, you obviously knew he was bullied to the point of wanting to leave in the first season, but here you're starting to actually see that up close. And so it's kind of weird how we're going forward, but we're kind of going backward in terms of people's stories and finding out how they have relevance today, which is one of the things I really liked about this show. As is custom, it's been about a month and change since our last episode breakdown. What does the title mean relative to this episode? Now, this title is a double title. One is in the Navajo language, which is Yaitso, and the translation of that is Big Monster. And let me give you the literal of that. There are several, I'm going to say monsters or creatures in Navajo mythology that dominate the landscape. And it's the story about the twin heroes. And there are several monsters that, well, technically they're not supposed to kill, because to kill them would, something that Emma says often, would unbalance the world. And so the twin heroes were not supposed to kill these 7, I think it's 7 monsters, I think it is, something to that effect. One of them is Yaitso. It's one of the first ones they mention. It's called Big Monster. There are several others that are horrible sounding. This one's the most simple sounding one.
They mentioned specifically and indirectly animals that are usually considered vermin or pests. Ants, the coyote.
Was it moles?
Right, moles. The guy at the Border Patrol was putting out mouse traps. Sylvia mentioned flies. Those are little monsters, specifically calling your attention to it. But who are the big monsters? I really think that Sylvia Washington is going to be one of the big monsters.
It's your every desire for Jenna Elfman to break
the way
bad.
She was talking to Joe, she was like, what do you think about this case? And, I don't think this just doesn't add up. Whereas BJ Vines is gone. He's a big monster in the sense that he's torturing Joe in terms of memory and whatnot because Joe broke his ethics and all that.
So I didn't put that together at all. So I love that. I did assume that the fly was representative of Sylvia because Leaphorn has like that dream or whatever where there's like a fly and then he like swats at the fly sound. I think it's when he's dreaming about BJ Vines.
Sort of, yeah.
Okay. So in my head, I was like, oh, she brought up the fly. She's going to be the fly to him. She's going to be this like annoyance that's going to be pestering and around and trying to like figure out and get in his space about this missing person.
There was also a hummingbird.
In the window,
when Joe,
right in the beginning.
Right at the beginning when Joe was waking up with Emma.
to contrast the difference between flies and...
Right, well, that's the counter, because a hummingbird obviously isn't a monster. Most people don't consider them pests.
Oh, they're beautiful. Oh, they flap their wings just as fast, I think, or something to that effect. But still, like, oh, we perceive one as beautiful and one as a monster, which could serve as, and I just want to mention this on the side, because I don't know how much I want to get into this, but I don't know how much they use this device in previous seasons, because I wasn't paying attention to it that much. But in this first episode alone, they keep using the split focus shot. And the split focus shot is something where you're actually using two separate cameras in order to produce an image where both the foreground image and the background image are completely in focus. The first one you see is one of when Joe picks up the phone, and it's about the blood in the scene where Ernesto Cata and George Bowlegs were previously. They looked like there was a fight, blah, blah, blah. But when he was on the phone and Emma was in the background, there was a split focus shot where Emma was perfectly in focus and Joe Leaphorn was perfectly in focus. There's a couple of others in this episode alone, and I'm trying to figure out what the significance of that is, actually. I think there's only one more, really.
There's one with him and Sylvia as well. Typically, that shot is reserved for like an ominous feeling. It's supposed to show you, for lack of a better term here, your good guy and your bad guy in the same frame, which is why when they did it the first time, it confused me, because Emma's not known as a bad guy right now. So it really made me like kind of side-eye her. It made me wonder if we're going to see another side to Emma this season.
Or it could be dread or foreshadowing.
Her being involved in the release of the article about forced sterilization could become a problem on the reservation.
But why would they choose to do it in that specific scene when he's on the phone hearing the news of these boys? That's where my mind goes. I do expect to hear more about the ongoing issue in women's health, but they chose to do it in that moment when Joe was on the phone receiving this specific news.
Unless for some reason the article and the boys being missing are tied together in some way we haven't figured out yet.
Maybe we
she's
find
involved.
that out later. Yeah. Now, when they did it again later with Joe and Sylvia, that scene made sense, right? Because she is this ominous looming figure over Joe. But the Emma one threw me.
There is a disconnect now. Joe is not telling her all of the truth, because Joe, being the type of man that he is, he's going to bear this burden on his own.
Again.
He would not give this burden to his wife, even though ultimately they do share everything. He is going to try to keep her out of this. And so I wondered, is it foreshadowing that there's going to be maybe some issue there with the truth coming out? Or is it because if we look at the morals of it, is it because technically Joe is now the bad guy?
Oh,
not
yes.
that he is a bad guy, but he did this thing that even he considers to be wrong. He did it for all the right reasons.
Yeah, that's what I was going to get to. And each person is a sort of light and dark. And I think that's what it's meant to illustrate, because the split focus shot is a shot that you really shouldn't do as a filmmaker. And when you do it this gratuitously, there is intention behind it.
Oh,
there has to be, because they're terrible shots. Nowadays, you can weave those shots very well. But clearly in this episode and in the past, there is digital work. You can see there's a blurred line. The out of focus part is the part in between the two. You'd said that basically there's a concerted effort for Joe to not show his cards because he's going to bear this burden alone. All of this comes together when Emma, going back to that conversation about the coyote, when she asks about the coyote and it's going north and he's handing the plate to her and it splits.
That was insane.
I can't even.
I would have been out of there so quick. I'm sorry. This is too much bad omen here. Like, we're done. We're done.
Have on that plate.
I mean, listen, I can explain away all these things. Not interested. Don't care. Spooky. I'll stick with the spooky. That's fine with me. I think what that does, though, is that coalesces everything that you just said, which I liked, which was there's a concerted effort to try to hide the truth, but the truth is so obvious to everybody involved.
Oh, Dave. The part of the plate that he holds is larger. She breaks off the smaller piece because it's supposed to show the unevenness between the two of them.
So this is why I said that. I didn't know which side was bigger.
His side of the plate was the bigger monster.
Mm-hmm. Is the bird in the bigger monster?
And the kids are little monsters. Why didn't we say this?
I've always said that.
It's fine. It's fine.
Pretty sure one of them's dead. You shouldn't call them little monsters.
I know. Listen, I was kidding. Just for the record, I guess. Also, they're fictional, so how about that? How about go to hell? But then also Shorty and Jim Chee. Shorty used to bully Jim Chee when they were little monsters. So there's that. Well, I wanted to say something about the flies because what I thought was interesting was exactly what you were saying. It's true that almost every scene with Sylvia in it has the fly sound in your ear or the reference of flies, the man with the fly swatter outside as she approaches the building. As if, yeah, you're right, she is an annoyance.
Well, she couldn't read Kayenta up above the door. I'm like, it's right there. She's not very observant.
Almost unfocused, you might say.
It wasn't like she was doing it to impress anybody because there was nobody there but the old man. So who's she fooling by pretending to not be observant?
It might be a mechanism to gauge the people around her to see, like, how are they going to behave with a woman who's a federal agent, which, like, how unlikely, sent from Washington, D.C., this is like a big deal.
It's interesting that you said it's a big deal because, on the other hand, Bernadette being a Border Patrol woman agent is not a big deal.
I agree with both of you because you're basically saying the same thing. What's great, they are a foil for each other. It's like a split focus. One is choosing to use her, well, let's just say femininity in her position of power to judge where people are at. The other one clearly has his conversations with Elinda. She's basically telling her colleagues, I want people to take me seriously. One is using cunning and the other one's just being more direct. They're trying to do the same thing. They're trying to use what people observe about them against other people to get to the truth, essentially. It doesn't hurt that they're both different people, different looking people, light hair, dark hair. Oh, I didn't get to finish the thing about the flies. The fly references and sounds aren't just when Sylvia is there. I actually think it's every time you hear or see a fly, it's what's going through Joe Leaphorn's mind when it comes to dealing with, like, see, he can't sleep, dealing with the BJ Vines thing. It's his conscience. He literally can't have a moment of peace without thinking about this thing because he's a good man who did a bad thing for a good reason. But his conscience can't clear itself out. He tries to make peace with it. And I'm not saying Sylvia is a manifestation of that. I'm just saying these two things could be separate. And it's not that she's here to cause problems. We don't know yet. I'm still willing to give Jenna a chance at being a good guy for the series.
Take all the fun out of it, Dave.
She might keep us guessing for most of the season.
I mean, I hope so. I was watching it and I'm like, you just need to lay off of him, Sylvia. You leave my Joe alone.
Now you have to tell Jenna that.
I
you
did.
Leave Mr. Leaphorn,
I did tell her that.
Lieutenant Leaphorn alone.
I did tell her that.
He's gone through so much. She'd be like, yeah, okay. I'm gonna show him.
So when Joe is having the dream and the monster comes out of the ground.
You're singing the first scene, the opening sequence?
Right. When we first see Joe in the very first episode in season 1, he's got that guy like up to his waist in the dirt, and you just think, you know, for sure he's gonna like shoot this white guy and bury him out in the desert. But instead he makes him put the pottery shards and stuff back in and rebury them. So my first thought was this monster is an ancestor. Then we get the tie-in with the archaeological site, where they're disturbing antiquities to the point that whoever killed the kid put an arrow point in his mouth.
You mean a lance point? And it could also be metaphorical, too. I like where your head's at because, again, jumping just off of what we just said about BJ Vines and keeping the past buried, no matter how far we try to bury the truth, let's say, it always ends up being uncovered somehow.
Is it his ancestors trying to tell him? Maybe they're not trying to tell him that he was wrong. Maybe they're like, you did the right thing, bro. Stop tearing yourself up about it.
I wonder, too, because when I was stacking watching this episode, having just listened to your recap of seasons 1 and season 2, I actually wonder if he can do that. And maybe that something will occur in season 3 that will allow him to kind of be okay with that. Because of another big monster, going back to the title, Sylvia Washington says that BJ Vines was very well connected, that people were looking for him. Now, that could be government, obviously, because of all the permits and all that stuff in Congress. That could also mean not government and shady figures from some companies and stuff like that that actually supported his endeavors. These could be the big monster that we're talking about. The thing that held
Maybe
up BJ
she's
Vines.
really not a FBI agent, and she's been sent there to, you said, other people, rich people or whatnot. Maybe she was sent there by some. I mean, this is total conjecture because I haven't seen anything else. But
right. This is like where you guys would say maybe the moon wears pants, Dave.
Yeah.
But listen, it's me, so I'm on for the ride.
You listened to our recap, and I was talking about how Bernadette and Chee and how they keep kind of changing places. I love that now he is like, it's our land, buddy. when they go to the archaeological site and the lady's like, yeah, that's his trailer. He's like, yeah, but it's our land, so we can, you can stay there or whatever. That's how far he's changed, right? Would he have done that in season 1? There's no way to be like, hey, this isn't my land, But I just thought it was funny. I love how he's kind of owning it now.
Yeah, that he has a place here. So to further your point, I remember having such shady feelings towards Jim Chee right from the beginning, because what initially he does is he's driving with his muscle car down the highway, and there's his family that's by the side of the road, and he just goes brrr. Whereas you see examples throughout the season of people nodding their head to people passing by, and if they see something wrong, they'll stop, or you know what I mean, like, or they'll say hi or something like that. And so I had like sus feelings about Jim Chee throughout, because you never know where an adaptation's gonna go. They may decide to make this guy like, oh, they might Dante him from The Walking Dead. He might turn him into Dante. I don't know. Maybe he's the horrible monster at the end of season 5. Yeah, so to your point, he's owning it. He's accepting his place in the community. I love where these two people ended up being.
Whereas Bernadette, I don't feel like she's really trying to fit in all that much. She's doing her job or whatever, but she doesn't agree with the way they're doing things. I don't think she thought she was going to be down there chasing women and children.
The way you put that is funny, though.
She's used to having a job where she's respected by the people around her, and she's actually doing things that mean something, like helping people. And that's why I think part of the reason she's leaning so hard into the trafficking angle is because she's not getting the satisfaction of helping people and doing things for people that she was on the reservation. Now she's, like I said, she's just chasing women and children down, and then nothing happens. They just get sent back.
It's just the way you say it. She just her thing. She just chases women and children. But I get it.
Which is what happened to Chee in the first season, because he didn't think what was going to happen to him ended up happening either. He was all cocky, and I'm just going to blow in here and be FBI, and everything's going to be fine and dandy, and he ended up getting sucked into it in a way he didn't expect.
Whereas I don't know that she will be in this. There is a mirror, or like a broken mirror between the two, because I can easily see her not adjusting to this culture or to this position. That's actually what I want to dig in on, because I tried to see the other side of that argument. Is that their job, or does the CBP just refer certain things to certain other departments, and their job is to kind of be the go-between? There's the CBP, Customs and Border Patrol, and then there's ICE, but then you have the FBI and the CIA, and you have all these other departments that the CBP refers certain things to, right? So if it's a crime, you refer to the FBI, so the ICE, you have deportations with the ICE, and CBP is just kind of like the go-between. They're just the guards at the gate. Bernadette is coming from a situation where her thing was about solving problems, whether it be putting person in a holding cell, or resolving domestic disputes, or helping people on the side of the road, or cats from trees, or whatever it's going to be. But her thing was to help people in the community, a civil servant. Whereas you're taking that civil servant and dropping her in a position where that's not your job. Your job is to either refer these people that you catch to the appropriate departments. And so is her boss wrong? I didn't get his name, but he's played by
Anthony Michael Hall.
That guy.
He's more than that guy, though.
No,
at this point.
he's that guy. He's Anthony Michael Hall.
I did not recognize that as Anthony Michael Hall.
He's one of the people that I can say on record has aged the best out of anybody I've ever seen in television history. He was nerdy, and then he became arguably sexy.
Oh.
I think Paul Rudd owns the age best.
No, he's a guy that never changes. I'm talking about the glow up. Like, who is this guy? Oh, he was the nerd from the Breakfast Club. Anyway, he's her boss in the show, Bernadette. And so I was trying to see his argument. I'm like, well, is that really her job? And is that a point of contention? Because he's speaking to her quite as a man of his time. A little misogyny never hurt anybody in the 70s, I guess. So and you have to kind of keep that in mind. So you're in 2025 trying to judge somebody from 1972, which we found out in this episode we are in 1972 because of Hanoi Jane overheard in this episode as Bernadette goes to speak to the mom and the kid.
So this is 3 years later?
Well, not that much longer after she got the Customs and Border Patrol job.
The second season is in 1969, though, I thought.
Right, because
I think it's 71.
No, 71.
No, they televised the moon landing. That was 69.
There was 2 moon landings.
Yeah.
There was one in 69 and one in 71.
Well, they're making such a big deal out of it. I thought it was the first one.
Rachel.
I thought that
Thank
too,
you.
but at the very beginning of season 2, they put up 1971 on the screen.
Yeah.
You guys.
We were debating how many years it had been, and Bridget and I were both under the impression that they were watching the first moon landing because they were making such a big deal out of it.
I was under that impression.
Thank you.
I mean-
but they did say the name of an astronaut, and I'm like, that's not right.
In 1971, it still was a big deal, though.
Why was it though? Because it's not even
Yeah.
real.
That's true. Well, actually, the second
That
one
was
might have
was
been
real.
real.
Yeah, the second one was real. The first one was
The first one
Was-
was not.
actually not real.
I'm
The first
sorry.
one, they were
I'm
just
sorry.
like, "Hey, look, we got here," so that made the second ones be like, "Oh, okay, we can make it."
I can't get reception on the way to work, but we flew to the moon. Get out of here. Okay.
And televised
okay.
it.
Okay.
And televised it.
Okay.
Listen, Bridget, they don't make them like they used to, so proof positive. So when you see Bernadette make the argument and everybody's kind of like rolling their eyes at her, I tried to see actually the other side of that. And I wondered if that was her job, because you want her to continue being the Bern that we know. But at the same time, this is what you opted in for. You wanted to reach for a higher position, but you didn't realize what that would mean, not being the person that you used to be. Kind of like Chee in the last season, kind of going off what we were saying, Sharon. Chee still wanted to be in the police business, but he didn't want to be a policeman, so he became a private investigator. But then he realized, it's just pulling me back to where I started anyway. By the way, I wanted to say this in the recap, but I'm like thinking to myself, they mentioned this offhand at the end of the season. Gordo Senna was going to step down as sheriff. And Leaphorn is like, yeah, I'm not into the politics of it. And I said, okay, why don't one of you step down, and maybe Bernadette could be sheriff, or you could just retire. Leaphorn, you look like you're out of sorts. You did a thing at the end of the second season. Maybe you just take a break and do something. Maybe you become the PI.
No,
and Bernadette
Dave,
can
he's
take
got
your
to keep
job.
a close eye on it in case anyone goes digging around. Obviously, that's what you do if you commit a murder. You stay in it so that you can keep an eye on what people are figuring out. Duh.
Technically, he didn't kill BJ Vines. BJ Vines died from exposure. And unless they can prove that he drove
Yeah.
him out there,
Well, it would be a kidnapping charge at minimum.
in the dream sequence at the beginning, when he was crawling on his belly and his feet were making tracks behind him, it almost looked like the wheel tracks that he left behind when he left BJ Vines out in the wilderness.
Oh, yeah. I think that is deeply tied to BJ Vines and having left him out there too. It's kind of like what you guys were saying in the recap. I think there is a sense of it's never over. Whatever we've seen in the last few seasons, we're never done with it. And there's always more to it. Speaking of, you get to the end of the episode, Senna, which by the way, I love that you pointed out that he was in Longmire, because he plays a completely opposite character in this series that he does in Longmire, and it's something to behold. He tells Senna to pull the thing out of Ernesto Cata's mouth. And he's like, I don't want to do it. He's like, you're the most capable person to do it. Just do it, Gordo. This thing that the archaeologist, her name is Eddie Isaacs? No, it's Oscar Isaacs. Sorry.
Wow, you're just really struggling with the Isaacs last
Wow.
name.
It's Teddy Isaacs,
She did
actually.
not look like Oscar Isaacs to me at all.
No, she looked
They
like
put on a lot of makeup.
it's Oscar Isaacs. You didn't know the accent? Anyway, so no, it's Teddy Isaacs, actually, which was why I thought, oh, it's like a guy's name. They had both said something about lance points, and I looked that up. The Folsom people are Paleo-Indian people who created the most advanced type of stone weaponry. It's fluted, it's flaked, it's constantly being shaved down or fluted and edged to have the most effectiveness. When they pulled what they pulled out of Ernesto Cata's mouth, it looked exactly as how one would describe a lance point. It's a stone-edged,
Well,
fluted
yeah, she
thing.
acted so suspicious, Dave. She might as well have been like, hey, we're guilty here at this place. Yeah, I'm guilty.
Oh, Mr. Reynolds is being delayed from the conference. No, I killed him too.
She was so sus.
Wow, okay.
Everything about her, I was like, something's up with this. This kid's death relates to this, some archaeological find or something. 100%.
You know, it's interesting that you say that, because what if what you're saying is true and that's a simple wrap it up, and what if it's bigger than what it is? And
Oh, well, it's going to be
that's
because
undoubtedly going to be.
she has to get shot, so there has to be some other...
What do you think that drawing is? The little girl drew the
Oh,
thing.
the pig. Well, she says pig, but it does not look like a
It
pig.
sounded like big to me.
Yeah, in the captions it says pig, which we have apparently, by the way. We have the
Another
captions.
pest.
Oh, look at Rachel's face, because you're muted and you don't hear the oh thing. No, I think it's an in-between, because people perceive pigs as filthy and whatever and whatnot, and yet they're akin to dogs and they smell terrific, unlike dogs. So kind of arguably better.
And pigs have feelings.
Wild pigs are vicious and mean and will kill people and dogs.
Even domesticated pigs will eat you if you fall in their pen.
Yes.
There's
That's
that.
because they're hungry.
So they might
Can you
have
blame
feelings,
them?
but it's not
Yeah.
above their little fat tushes. Okay.
Yeah.
They'll-
No, I would probably eat someone.
Dogs aren't above eating their owners if
fell
pressed
in my
either.
pen.
So
That's what I
Or
keep telling you.
Cats. My cats will devour me if I sleep too long.
Yeah.
Now you guys are like owning up to it after I've said it for years. You're like, yeah, oh no,
We've
Dave, they're
never said
sweet
you're
and
wrong.
amazing.
Never said
They
it
have
was
He
wrong.
just
soul.
says they're worth it.
Well, that's interesting because we kept talking about split focuses and people that are the same or should be dreaded. One's light, one's dark, and big pests, little pests. So the pig is a perfect example of what is reviled and also what is ultimately really sweet. What Sylvia says about the fly itself. It's a complex organism that is just magnificent. Were
A
it not
marvel
that-
in
Marvel of
engineering.
Yeah, exactly. And yet its only fatal flaw is that it's supremely annoying.
So I'm
Uh-oh.
I'm gonna tell you what I thought when she said pig. That it's another name that some people might call a cop.
That's what I was getting to. Yes.
Oh.
Yes.
Oh.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, that's true.
So there's that.
I wondered if she was trying to tell Bernadette that a cop was trying to traffic them.
right, but that's a great
Or
idea.
someone in authority.
Is that a Spanish colloquialism?
I don't know.
It is. I mean, they call them also pigs,
Okay.
but I forget what it is in Spanish.
Puerca.
Stop
Puerca.
it.
It is. That's
Is that what it
100%.
is?
Yes.
Yeah, it is.
It sounds like porky, but maybe that's where it comes from. I don't know.
Puerca pig.
The Spanish equivalent,
Big
Mexican
pig?
equivalent of porky.
There's other options. If you said puerca, it's in reference to a particular person who is a woman.
Oh.
Just Spanish for woman. What?
Cerdo is also where it's,
That's the one I know.
but that's like for hog or swine. And then apparently also el chancho.
Gordo means fat, doesn't it? So
Yeah,
It
that's
does.
right.
Cochino Galapago also means pig or sow. but
David's
that's
agreeing
not-
like he speaks fluent.
He's like, yeah,
fluent
yeah, yeah,
Spanish.
yeah.
Oh yeah. Yep, that one too.
Yeah,
Mhm, Yep,
yeah.
Keep going. Keep
See,
going.
see.
Yeah, I'm so smart. I'm so
See.
smart, you guys.
See,
Andiamo.
see,
Arriba.
Yo sabo, yo
it's-
sabo. I'm just kidding.
He's trying not to pee his
I was
pants.
just joking, Dave.
Actually, that's right. It's 100% correct. It's very nebulous. There's not a lot to go on. That drawing is horrendous. Sorry, kid.
I was
I'm
gonna
really-
be
I'm really sorry.
I looked at it and I was like, what is
What
that?
in the world?
It has to be a symbol. There is no other.
Yeah.
What else is that? Honestly.
I was trying to see
afraid
like
to
a
say.
snout of some kind. It's not. It's got to be a symbol. And I'm sure Bernie's going to see it at some point and be like, oh.
Is that exactly like
yeah,
that.
that's exactly
Yeah,
what she's
I
going to
love
do.
that.
That's
I love
exactly
that
what she
reaction.
sounds like. Yeah.
I love that idea though. What if it's one of the border patrol agents?
Well, I don't know if it's a border patrol agent, because if that was a symbol for border patrol, she would have recognized it.
Yeah, of course. But I'm just saying, like, what if it's a symbol that's on the side of the van or something?
And it's iffy
Yeah.
too because the van itself has
Mexican
Mexican
plates.
Mexican plates from
Yeah.
Chihuahua, which I thought was interesting because of all the references they dropped from the Mixtec people. They are largely from the
Oaxacan was
Going on
one
that,
of
what
the-
if it's Gordo?
Thank you. Here's the thing. I had actually thought of that because one of the split focus shots is near the end, but it's not 100% because it's so dark. You really don't know if it's doing a split focus. And I would really hate that because for once I would like A. Martinez to not be a bad guy.
I mean, I'll be honest. At the end of season 2,
Because he's a great bad guy.
when he was
Ish.
in the car with the blonde guy and the blonde guy got away, the first time I watched season 2, I got the impression that he had let him get away. And when I went back and watched it again, it wasn't quite evident. It didn't really seem that way, but I always had that feeling. So I'm wondering if he really is the pig.
I wonder also, but I'm leaning more towards I'm tired of him being a bad guy, the actor. But I had wondered the same exact thing from the beginning. I'm like, oh, he's part of it. He's just letting him slide because there's something, he's on the take or something with the BJ vines and everything. But anyway, but it turns out like when you see season 3, episode 1, this episode, He's just the same old, oh hell. He sees the tire tracks, is like, okay, more work that I need to do.
It's one of
And
those things where I'm
love
like,
it.
are you annoyed by your job? Do you even like it?
He was trying to retire and they
He's
keep
like,
pulling
oh,
him back
come
in.
on.
He's like the Danny Glover of this Lethal Weapon couple, basically. I'm too old for this stuff.
Okay, I wanted to say that Mixtec languages shared by the states of Oaxaca, Guerrero, and then also Puebla, which honestly, I've been to Puebla. Puebla City was my favorite place in Mexico. It was so cool. The history there is so rich, and there's all of these statues and old buildings. And anyway, it's a really beautiful place, and you should definitely go if you ever travel to Mexico. Because of the migration from this region, mostly as a result of extreme poverty, the Mixtec languages have expanded to Mexico's main urban areas, including the state of Mexico and the federal district, and even agricultural areas such as San Quentin Valley in Baja California.
You're saying today because that was not the case back
Correct.
in the 70s.
Correct. Yeah. I was just surprised by it because it was on the endangered language list.
Until I think it was 20, 30 years ago, to the point where when I was researching this, you get videos from universities in Colorado saying, how do we integrate the Mixtec language with families and stuff like that? And you'd hear stories about, similar to my own household, where the parents would speak a certain language, would speak Arabic, let's say, and then they'd speak a mix of Hebrew and Arabic to me, but also English, because duh. But what they were saying about the Mixtec language is that the parents would speak that to each other and not pass that on to their children. So they got a bunch of families and community elders and people to teach the university all the dialects and the root words and stuff like that, so they keep the language alive in the university system so that people can keep studying it too, along with the culture and all that stuff. So they're doing their best. And I think this is the best place to be able to keep that alive. And people want to know about this stuff too. And what happened to Bridget? Her dog had to pee.
No, either my dog fell on the ground or something is
She had to
under the
pee.
house. Because all of a sudden, all I heard was like, bam! And I was like, what the hell is
again?
going on?
It's the creature from
I
the
was
show.
gonna say, it's the ancestor coming for you.
Oh my God, please
It's-
no,
yeah, it's
because
so.
that shot where it like pans over and
the
Joe's
Twiggies, and then
I
it
was like-
rises up.
I was like, oh my God, it's a zombie. It was so terrifying to me.
Speaking of, okay, this is something that you guys
I
did
don't know
not
who did
touch
that
on.
makeup, but man, oh man.
One of the things that I really loved about the series from the first frame is how like the title sequence is very reminiscent of the earlier seasons of The Walking Dead. There's that vibe, that kind of sepia picture frame vibe to it. In the title sequence is all the elements from the season that you will be seeing. And you did get that sort of feel from The Walking Dead, is that even though they were more or less the same for the first 8 seasons, each title sequence had a little tweak to it as people left and joined the show, and involved different prop elements in the title sequence to kind of signify where people were at. But what do you guys think of the title sequence of the show too? Just to kind of cap that.
It's all right. I fast forward through it. I watched the first one, and then if nothing changes, I just fast forward through them after that.
It's like Earth Abides all
Yeah.
over again.
I keep it on because Dave gets mad when I don't. I won't lie to you. I second screen it. It's
I
on
see.
and I'm like,
Boring. It's actually pretty short too, though, to be honest. By the way, the music is made by Kevin Kiner. He has a crazy catalog, if you don't mind me just rattling off a couple things. He has done the music for everything from NCIS Origins to DC's Creature Commandos, Titans and Doom Patrol, Star Wars Ashoka, Bad Batch, Clone Wars, Tales of the Jedi, and Tales of the Empire, Star Trek Enterprise from back in 2004-05, Stargate SG-1, Tremors, Stuart Little.
oh, wait. He did Stargate SG-1 because
Yes.
that is a banger.
Exactly.
Enterprise
so dynamic.
is horrible. That is an awful part
You're
of his
talking
catalog.
about... Well,
it's so bad.
You're talking about the theme song, which was written by Diana Warren and performed by some other band, which I actually sung on stage because I loved it so much.
It's so
and
horrible, and that
Rod
show
Stewart.
sucks.
You're dead to me, but let's move on.
Scott Bakula was a miscast. Suck it, Dave.
Yeah, I actually agree with that. But I got used to it. And 143 other compositions going all the way back to 1985. And he's got an epic sort of goatee soul patchy thing going on.
What is it about people who score music for like television and movies?
His
with
crazy
they always
facial
have
hair.
like they're always like, yeah, I love a soul patch.
So another thing that we learn in this episode is that, because we were talking about Bernadette, just to remind everybody, we learned that her colleagues are different native peoples from the Southwest, closer to the border. So along with the mixed tech that we hear from the mother and child, we get Linda, one of her female colleagues. She is from the Tohono O'odham, and they're largely in the Sonora Desert in Mexico, but some in Arizona. The other guy, which I call other guy in my notes, who's very also like, this girl can get my back anytime. Okay. He speaks Yaqui. Yaqui is also from the Sonora Desert. It has Aztecan roots, basically. We're getting like an eyeful of like all these different indigenous peoples from the region. Yaqui. It's spelled Yaqui, in case you wanted to know.
Yes, I did see that when I was looking something up.
Tono Odam. Oh, and that actually brings us to the coyote thing one of you asked about. Coyotes are a lot like the Loki in Norse mythology. They're
Tricksters.
troublemakers. They're tricksters, right? However, unlike, well, depends on the interpretation, but Native Americans actually have a lot more reverence for the coyote because of their power. Their trickery is for good. However, largely the advice is when you do see a coyote in the road, turn the other way. Let's play it safe. Don't get in its way. Let it do its thing. But one of the biggest things is that the reason why Navajos largely revere the coyotes because they can command rain. The Mixtec people actually call themselves the New Savi. It's the people of the rain. It's N with the squiggly UU, capital SAVI. So I thought that was kind of an interesting tie to the coyote. They basically test the bounds of order, which I thought was particularly key for this series. Just like Joe Leaphorn is testing the bounds of order, or maybe even Sylvia Washington, depending on how far she's willing to go to get to the truth. Obviously, they find the body of Ernest Acata at the end. So he's been murdered, shoved in a storm drain above them. What does this mean for Bowlegs? Does it look like the bike that they found in the original scene after the phone call? Looks like claw marks because your brain is automatically broken from the first scene that you see with the creature and everything, which is terrible because it's such misdirection. Looks like a machete. Really? No, we saw the monster in the first scene. It's a monster.
I hope it's not like somebody trying to scare natives off of the land or something so they can hunt for archaeology or something like that. Like that was season 1 and 2.
I was going to say season 1 was a misdirect. They were using the folklore and legends of the native people to scare them away from investigating the murders any further. That was Benjamin So, not really Benjamin James.
That was not Benjamin So.
Yeah, not Benjamin So. And Frank Nakai.
Not the father.
So maybe it's Nakai who is the monster coming back for his...
See, I was sort of thinking that, but then I was thinking, okay, do they really want to go hard on some things not being over yet? How hard do they want to go?
Know, because maybe it would be too much if it was coming from season 2 to season 3, but because there's been a season in between, has enough time passed for Nakai to come back now. And is he all jacked up and burnt in the face and messed up looking?
Oh,
you don't know.
Oh, yeah, well... Yeah, just because you survived something doesn't mean you survived unscathed. That's a great point. Wow, dude, that is messed up, but also genius. Because here's the thing. I was thinking throughout that season, he's kind of a dickbag.
Nakai?
Yeah.
He's
not
horrible.
And yet he's not the worst because he kind of makes a turnaround at the end.
Well, it's not that. He has principles. That's really what it is.
Right.
He has principles. Ben James, whatever.
Not the father,
not
Benjamin
so. Has
it's so much easier. Sorry,
he's willing to negate his principles because he's like, no, I would rather just have the money so that we can just take care of these things. I'm doing this for everybody else's good, so I don't worry about who gets harmed in the process. But Nakai puts his foot down because he's like, you're killing our people, and you didn't have to. You went out of your way to do it,
right? And you didn't hesitate.
And that's what really upsets Nakai. And so he's not a good guy.
No.
But he's in the grayer area of bad.
Right. I can accept that answer, that his face is so messed up that when people see him, they're like, Mom, yay, so. And he is pretty tall too, by the way, just to add to all of that. Oh.
Ancestor guy coming out of the ground could have been anybody because he was just scraggly and dark and raggedy looking.
Do you think we'll see Jenna Elfman and Dwight from The Office? What is his name?
Rainn Wilson.
Rainn Wilson.
Devoted Dan.
Devoted Dan. Yeah.
You think he's going to be banging Sylvia in the back of his shaggin' wagon?
Oh,
whoa. You went too far. I was just thinking like a comedic scene between the two. God damn it.
No, because she's going to be investigating BJ Vines. She's not going to be investigating the people from season 1. So it's going to be more related to season 2, I think. But you never know, because she could dig into other stuff.
There's no reason for them not to maybe connect the first and the second seasons in some spooky manner of some kind. Because they're already starting to lay the groundwork a little bit for that everything is really kind of connected. Because it did mention the Sows basically, and the relationship between that and bow legs and all that in this episode.
I should clarify, Washington is there to investigate several cases.
Yeah, exactly.
And I'm guessing Widover's death is probably part of one of
Front
those
and
cases.
center. Yeah, and how that connects.
She's probably going to have questions for Jim.
We also haven't seen Sally growing thunder yet.
You had mentioned that in the recap, and I was satisfied with the idea that we wouldn't see her again because it would make sense for her not to show up again. She needed a fresh start with people who do not know her.
Well, we don't know because she was with Nakai. So is she helping Nakai after he escapes?
Her daughter.
Oh, I was thinking of the witch.
I thought she died.
Who were you thinking of?
Oh,
I thought the witch
Sharon
died.
Did the witch die?
What?
Yeah, I thought she died.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah,
She
that's
died
right.
at
She
the end of
burns alive in her
season
house. Or did she?
Or did she? Like Frank Nakai.
Like Frank
Burned alive in a
Nakai
cave.
and like Madison.
What's the daughter's name again? I'm
Sally.
sorry?
She's right. It's Sally. I heard growing
Sally.
the thunder. I heard the thunder part and I was like, oh, the witch. Sorry.
Oh,
This is my bad.
so I wasn't off. So
No,
yeah,
you
she's
were
off the show.
completely right. Yeah, we haven't seen her yet.
Okay.
We have no idea what's
Again?
going on there.
Oh my gosh.
Oh my
I'm so humble. Again,
I'm so
I'm sorry.
sorry, you guys. I've given him two.
Too long a leash. I know. You got to yank it
I've
back. You
given
gotta.
him two examples in which he's been right in this episode.
You should have done what Leaphorn did with the blonde man. You should have tied a rope around me and just pulled. Just pulling every time I got out of line. So if you like what you heard, sorry. Head over to ratethispodcast.com/squawking dead 5 stars and a Lance point is all we need to know that you love us. But tell us what you liked. Tell us what you didn't like. Tell us what you think we might have missed. Just remember to tell us after every single episode. It does count. Say whatever you want. Just say something. And if you really like what we're doing, head on over to either ko-fi.com/squawkingdead or patreon.com/squawkingdead and just follow us. Usually we will have the schedules up for you to join us in the studio in the real-time chat for you to give us your thoughts and feelings and things. Because guess what? Hey, listen, The Last of Us is coming in April. The Walking Dead Dead City is coming in May. Fallout's probably coming in May, also in June or something to that effect that will probably make us want to kill ourselves. But that's something you can say on the internet now, right? That you couldn't say anymore?
Unalive
I
yourself.
want to live myself. I want to live you. So just follow us. We will put our recording schedules up in a pin post on either platform for you to see the changes. We will notify you of those changes. There's a little calendar, all that stuff. And if you really like what we're doing and you want us to continue because that's what we want to do too. If you don't, there's no way we can continue because we have to pay bills and I will have to put more money down. I don't want to do that anymore. And I am right now. So consider tipping us on Ko-fi to get immediate and forever Discord access, as well as the unedited episode recordings for 30 days. If you happen to join a membership tier for as little as $4 a month, you can get that and more in Discord, more access to channels. If you join the Whisperers, Survivors, and Great M tier, you will get a free classic t-shirt upon signing up. Join the Survivors or Great M tier, you can show up alongside us in these episode breakdowns as we discuss these episodes so that your voice can be heard and your face can be heard. Because your face is very loud.
But not now, and not these.
Not Dark Winds. I've been your host, David Cameo, and I was joined by...
Me, CosmoMom09.
Blazy Gardner.
And Bridget. You can also follow me at ko-fi.com/punkybrewster. That's PUNKYBRUISETER.
And thank you for watching this, because this is, again, new ground, new territory, another show by AMC, but it's not the Walking Dead universe. So if you are here and you are listening to this, hopefully right after it airs publicly on AMC, I salute you and I thank you and I hope you return for these episode breakdowns because we do this for you, kids. And if you don't like what you're hearing, just tell us. Tell us in the comments of the YouTube video. Like this video on YouTube. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, which has broken 1,000 phone subscribers and growing thanks to you.
Watch it on YouTube so we have
Just
our
do
watch
it.
hours. And let Rachel go to bed. Will you already? Oh my
Thanks.
God.
David never stops talking. I'm so tired.
Good night. Good night. Just go. Bye
Good
now.
night.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Yeah. Thank you again for making it to the end of this gargantuan episode. To give you a little insight, this episode was basically 2 episodes mashed into one. Considering there was so much crossover between the 2 episodes, we went back and forth on whether we should actually combine them, find ways to weave the season premiere with the recap episode, correcting the record in certain spots, as I mentioned earlier, but also to kind of give a little bit more enhancement on some of the background of how the show was made, how it connects to the Tony Hillerman novels, and all the background information therein. As always, we like to thank our Great M Survivors and Whisperers members in that order. It's something that we haven't done in quite a while, and much has changed since then. By changed, I mean yet again, our memberships are falling off, and we could really use your help. We still have the goal present on our Ko-fi page to raise money so that we can go to the camp. We're trying to raise $1,000 before the end of May, which is when we're heading to the camp, in order to help pay for our lodgings. You can either tip us on Ko-fi or join a membership tier on either Patreon or Ko-fi. Either will help us reach our goal. We're about 78% of the way in, and even though the money raised is to help take us to the camp, we still have bills to pay in terms of hosting, some automation, advertising. So whatever you can do to help keep this podcast afloat is really very much appreciated. So starting with the Great M tier, we have at RealRyanGM on X and Instagram. In the Survivors tier, we have Douglas Atherton at Walking Dead Artist, the number 2 on Instagram. And in the Whisperers tier, we have at Eliza Jones 71 on Instagram or at JonesAJ6 on X. You can also catch her on Relishing the Dead podcast on both YouTube and even Facebook via both the group and the Facebook page. And of course, at Kim Rowley, the number 1 on Facebook. We've already recorded the first 5 episodes of the season, and we've held off on the 6th to be recorded later this week. We've yet to receive the last 2 episodes of the season, which is episodes 7 and 8, but cannot wait to see if they will be dropped in our screener's inbox before the end of the season so we can do our due diligence for you. Many thanks to AMC for making those available to us so that we can have these ready and out the door for you immediately after you watch. And many thanks to you for making it this far into this podcast, listening to me say words and things. We really do appreciate it. And with that, we'll see you very soon. And just remember that we are Squawking Dead.